entering a fight club, until she took down their best fighter in seconds. The Iron Fangs Fight Club was no place for a beautiful girl. It was a battleground hidden beneath the city, where blood and sweat paved the way to fortune. Fighters stepped into the ring knowing one thing: only the strong walked out. There were no rules, no limits, no second chances. Men with iron fists and stone hearts brawled for survival, each one hungrier than the last. Some fought for money, some for power, and some for nothing more than the sick pleasure of watching their opponent crumble. But no one came here unprepared. No one stepped into this world unless they were willing to risk everything. And yet, she did. A woman, small, graceful, too delicate for this place. She walked through the crowd with quiet steps, her presence almost out of place among the brutal warriors and ruthless gamblers. She didn't belong here. She shouldn't have been here. And yet, here she was. The moment she signed up, the men burst into laughter. Fighters smirked, the announcer grinned in amusement. To them, this was entertainment. A delicate woman stepping into the most vicious ring in the underground? She wouldn't last a second. Or so they thought. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Eva moved through the underground fight club, her every step feeling like she had stepped into another world, a world where violence was king and only the strong had a place. The air was thick with sweat, smoke, and the metallic scent of blood. Dim, flickering lights barely illuminated the faces around her, casting shadows over men with bruised knuckles and hardened stares. Some sat with swollen eyes and split lips, their bodies slumped in exhaustion after a brutal match. Others stood tall, fists clenched, waiting for their turn in the ring. The crowd was alive with energy, shouting, laughing, throwing down stacks of cash as they placed their bets. Money and violence went hand in hand here. But the moment she entered, something changed. Eyes turned to her, conversations quieted. Fighters who had just been boasting about their victories now stared, their expressions shifting from amusement to disbelief, because she was not like the others. There were women here, yes, but they were nothing like her. They were just as fearsome as the men, built strong and broad, with scars lining their arms, their faces hardened by years of survival in a world that didn't forgive weakness. They were brawlers, enforcers, women who had fought tooth and nail to earn their place in this brutal underground. But Eva, she was beautiful, not just in the way she looked, her delicate features, her soft hair, her slender frame, but in the way she carried herself. She walked with quiet grace, her posture poised, her face unreadable. She didn't fidget, she didn't hesitate, and that unnerved them. Because a woman like her didn't belong here. A woman like her should have feared this place. Instead, she moved through the chaos as if it didn't faze her, her sharp eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail. The blood-stained floors, the fighters wrapping their hands in preparation, the bookkeepers counting stacks of cash in back rooms. She could hear the murmurs as she passed. Who is she? She's lost. Bet she won't even make it past the first punch. But Eva ignored them. She stepped up to the registry table, where a man with a clipboard smirked down at her. He was thick-armed, with a face that had clearly seen its fair share of fights. "You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart?" he asked, chuckling as he leaned forward. She met his gaze without blinking. "I came here to fight." The man scoffed, glancing at the other officials beside him, who all shared the same amused expression. "You?" he chuckled again. "This ain't a betting table, girl. You're not just watching tonight." "I didn't come here to watch," Eva said evenly. His grin widened, entertained by the challenge. "All right then, don't say we didn't warn you." He scribbled down her name and tossed her a pair of hand wraps, still shaking his head. As Eva took them and moved toward the fighters area, she could still feel the eyes on her, watching, whispering, underestimating her. They thought this was a mistake. They thought she was just a foolish woman who had wandered into something she didn't understand. But they didn't know her. They didn't know what she had been through. And soon they would learn. The officials exchanged glances, their smirks widening. The crowd was already entertained. murmuring among themselves, laughing at the absurdity of it all. A delicate woman stepping into the ring? It was comical, but amusement wasn't enough. She needed to be put in her place. This wasn't a place where pretty things survived. This was a battleground. Here, mercy didn't exist. Strength ruled, and weakness was crushed. If a woman, a beautiful, fragile woman, thought she could stand among them, then she would learn the hard way just how ruthless this world was. So they didn't send out a rookie. They didn't send out someone she could last a few rounds against. They sent out Victor the Hammer Rourke, the best, a man known for breaking bones, ending matches in a single punch. And yet, in just a moment, everything they believed about strength, about power, was about to be shattered. Who truly holds the upper hand? The one who looks strongest, or the one who understands the fight? Stay with us, because this is only the beginning. What happens next will leave you stunned. One strike, one moment, and the entire Iron Fangs Fight Club will fall into silence. And if you've been enjoying these stories, if you love seeing underdogs rise, challenges met with unwavering determination, and justice delivered in the most unexpected ways, then make sure to subscribe. There's more coming, more stories of grit, resilience, and those who dare to defy expectations. You won't want to miss what happens next. Now, back to the fight. The moment his name was called, a roar of approval filled the warehouse. Fighters grinned. Gamblers rushed to place their bets, the odds stacked against Eva without question. Victor's got this, someone laughed. She won't even last a second. What a joke. The smirking official turned back to Eva. Still sure about this, sweetheart? Eva didn't blink. She simply tightened the wraps around her hands, her face unreadable. The crowd laughed again. They mistook her silence for fear. They thought reality was finally sinking in, that she was realizing her mistake. But they were wrong, because Eva wasn't afraid, and soon they would all understand why. But who was Eva Laurent? To most, she was a woman who didn't belong in a place like this. She was too small, too delicate, the kind of woman people assumed needed protecting. She had soft features, eyes that held quiet grace, and a frame that seemed more suited for a ballroom than a fight ring. But assumptions could be dangerous, because Eva Laurent was not what she seemed. She had been trained in martial arts since she could walk. Her father, a grandmaster, had raised her not just to defend herself, but to become a warrior in her own right. While other children played, she was learning discipline, precision, the art of movement. Her body was shaped by years of practice, her muscles trained for speed and power. She didn't have the brute strength of men twice her size. She didn't need it. Eva fought with technique, efficiency, and a kind of precision that turned every strike into a weapon. And she wasn't new to danger. She had fought men before. Real fighters. Dangerous people. Street enforcers who ruled with fear. Corrupt thugs who thought they were untouchable. Opponents who underestimated her until they hit the ground and never got up again. She had walked through the darkest parts of the world, where power belonged to the ruthless. She had faced men who looked down on her, sneered at her, thought they could take her down without effort. They all learned the same lesson. Underestimating Eva Laurent was the last mistake they ever made. And tonight, this fight club would learn that same lesson. And her enemy? Victor Rourke. The moment his name was announced, the audience erupted into laughter. To them, this was a joke, a mismatch so ridiculous that it was almost cruel. They're feeding her to Victor, someone cackled. She won't last 5 seconds, another sneered. All around, men and women alike shook their heads, amused at the absurdity of it all. Victor Rourke was a monster, a man built like a war machine, fists like iron, a reputation forged through knockouts and broken ribs. And Eva? She was small, delicate, beautiful. She's gonna regret stepping in that ring. Maybe she thought they'd take it easy on her because she's pretty. Victor's about to teach her a real lesson. To them, there was no doubt. This fight wasn't about who would win. It was about how long she would last before she hit the ground. But as the crowd continued their jeers and taunts, Ava just stood there, silent, waiting. In the underground world of blood and violence, Victor Rourke was a legend. He wasn't just another fighter, he was the fighter. The man who never lost, the man whose fists shattered bones like glass. They called him the Hammer because when he struck, it felt like steel colliding with flesh. One hit, that was all it took, and when a man went down, he stayed down. No one stood against him, no one even tried. Victor didn't just fight in the Iron Fangs Fight Club, he ruled it. He was the one people bet their money on, the one who made this place profitable. A fighter so brutal that gamblers felt safe risking their entire fortune on him because there was never any doubt about the outcome. Victor always won, and he made sure everyone knew it. But he wasn't born into power. He clawed his way up from nothing, from a world where only the strong survived. He was raised in the kind of place where weakness was punished and fear was a currency. He learned early that the only way to stay alive was to hit harder, move faster, and never show mercy. By the time he was old enough to make his own choices, Victor had already built a reputation, not just as a fighter, but as a man who got things done. He became muscle for hire, the kind of man criminals sent when they needed someone to disappear, the kind of man who enforced debts, crushed kneecaps, and made sure no one dared step out of line. Fighting wasn't just a skill for him, it was survival. And when he stepped into the underground rings, it was clear from the start, he was built for this world. The Iron Fangs Fight Club wasn't just a place to fight, it was an empire. A business where power flowed through broken bones and bruised fists, where the real money wasn't made in the ring, but behind the scenes, through bets, deals, and favors traded in blood. And to keep the money flowing, the club needed a champion. Victor was that champion. With him in the ring, the club thrived. No one wanted to bet against him. No one wanted to challenge him. And anyone who thought they could didn't walk away in one piece. He wasn't here for sport. He was here because he was paid to be. The club needed fear to keep its power. Victor delivered. That's why, when Ava Laurent stepped into the ring, he didn't see an opponent. He saw an insult, a joke, a woman who had no business standing in the same space as him. The officials didn't even hesitate. If this foolish girl wanted to fight, they would make sure she learned her lesson. So they sent out Victor the Hammer Rourke. They weren't just letting her fight, they were feeding her to a beast. And Victor had no intention of holding back. The moment Eva stepped into the ring, the entire fight club roared with laughter. It wasn't just the men. Even the women, tough, hardened fighters who had earned their place in this world of blood and violence, looked at her like she was nothing. She didn't belong here, not in their eyes. The Iron Fangs Fight Club was built on ruthlessness. It was a place where strength reigned, where respect was earned through force, and where stepping into the ring meant putting your life on the line. There was no room for weakness, no patience for mistakes, and above all, there was no mercy. She was a joke to them, a beautiful woman with soft features, delicate hands, and a frame that seemed far too fragile for this world. To them, she was nothing more than a foolish outsider who had wandered into a place she didn't understand, someone who would crumble the second real pain hit her. And the Iron Fangs had their own way of dealing with people like her. They didn't turn her away. They didn't warn her. They didn't give her an easy fight. No, that wouldn't be entertaining. Instead, they wanted to teach her a lesson the way they knew best, through pain. And there was no one better suited for that than Victor the Hammer Rourke. He was their best, their strongest, their most brutal. If they sent out an ordinary fighter, she might actually have a chance, however small. But against Victor, she had none. That was the whole point. The crowd wasn't here to watch a fair fight. They were here to watch a slaughter. They wanted to see her arrogance shattered. They wanted to see the moment she realized she had made the worst mistake of her life. They wanted to watch as she begged for mercy, mercy that would never come. Victor didn't hold back. He didn't take it easy on anyone. He didn't care who stood in front of him. If they were foolish enough to step into the ring, they had already accepted their fate. And this time would be no different. As soon as the officials made the call, the crowd erupted with cheers. They wanted a show, and they knew they were about to get one. Eva wouldn't just lose, she would be destroyed. And that was exactly what they were expecting. Because no one had ever beaten Victor Rourke. The moment Victor Rourke heard his name called, he didn't even hesitate. He cracked his knuckles, slow, deliberate, almost bored. He had broken men twice her size, shattered ribs with a single punch, knocked out champions who had spent their whole lives fighting. And now, they were asking him to fight her? It was almost insulting. He rolled his shoulders, stepping toward the ring, letting the weight of his presence sink into the crowd. He could feel their excitement. They knew what was coming. The match had already been decided before it even began. She was just another fool who didn't know better. Another dreamer who thought courage could make up for weakness. Another lamb stepping onto the butcher's block. The moment he got into the ring, he saw her up close for the first time. She didn't belong here. Not in a place like this. She wasn't just small. She wasn't just delicate. She was beautiful. Not in the way of the hardened women who had fought their way through the underground, carving out their place in a world of blood and grit. No. She had a face that looked untouched by violence, like she had never been broken before. And that made this fight even more ridiculous. Victor scoffed. This wasn't going to be a fight. This was going to be an execution. Fighting women had never interested him before. There were female fighters in the underground, and he respected the ones who could hold their own. They were brutal, vicious, as strong as any man. Some of them had even been worth fighting. But this girl, she was none of those things. She had no scars, no hardened glare, no muscle carved from years of survival. She didn't look like someone who had bled for her strength. She looked untouched. And that was why this fight was nothing more than a joke to him. Victor wasn't just going to win. He was going to make an example out of her. A lesson to anyone foolish enough to think they could walk into this world without consequence. So when they asked if he was willing to fight her, he just laughed. Send her in. If this was what they wanted, he wouldn't deny them the entertainment. It wasn't his fault she had made a stupid decision. The moment the officials announced the fight, the crowd went wild. At first, it was all laughter. Some people couldn't even believe it was real. You're kidding, right? They're putting her against Victor? This ain't a fight. It's a public execution. Poor girl won't last 5 seconds. But as the laughter faded, the real conversations began. The women in the club, fighters themselves, hardened by survival, looked at Eva with a mix of pity and scorn. They had fought tooth and nail to be respected in this world, and here was this girl, walking in like she belonged. Some shook their heads. She was going to regret this. The men, on the other hand, were grinning, eager for what was about to happen. Some of them cheered for Victor, placing their bets without hesitation. No one bet on Eva. Not a single person. The odds weren't just stacked against her. They didn't exist. And deep down, everyone knew the truth. Victor wouldn't hold back. There would be no mercy, no kindness, no easy way out. The laughter hit first. Loud, mocking, drowning the entire warehouse in ridicule. Eva stood still, her expression unreadable, but she could feel it. Every eye was on her, not with curiosity, not with respect, but with amusement. She had expected it. She had prepared for it. But standing here, in the center of a world that saw her as nothing more than a joke, it was different. The jeers came from every corner. She's gonna cry before the fight even starts. Better call a medic. Actually, forget it. She won't last long enough to need one. I've seen glass cups tougher than her. Eva didn't flinch. She didn't shift under their stares. But deep inside, she felt the weight of it all. Not because she doubted herself. She knew who she was. She knew what she was capable of. But this wasn't just about her skill. It was about the fact that no one here even considered the possibility. that she could win. To them, she was already defeated. And yet, she didn't feel anger. She didn't feel shame. She felt calm. She had been here before. Not in this ring, not in this underground pit of violence, but in places just like it. Places where people saw her as less, where they assumed she was weak because she didn't look the part, where they underestimated her. And every time, she proved them wrong. She glanced across the room. Victor Rourke. He wasn't laughing like the others, but he wasn't taking her seriously either. He stood there, rolling his shoulders, looking at her like she was some minor inconvenience. Like he wasn't even going to try. That was fine. He didn't need to take her seriously, because the moment the fight started, she would make him. Ava stood in the center of the ring, calm, still, unshaken. Across from her, Victor Rourke rolled his shoulders, cracking his knuckles, his grin stretching wide. This would be over in seconds. He took a slow step forward, tilting his head as he looked her over, eyes gleaming with amusement. He let out a short laugh. "You sure you want to be here, sweetheart?" he asked, voice dripping with mockery. "I don't know if you're brave or just plain stupid." Eva didn't respond. She just stood there, unmoving, her expression unreadable. Victor let out another chuckle. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the crowd. "You see this?" he called out, shaking his head. "This is what happens when people don't know their place. A pretty little thing walks in here, thinks she's one of us, thinks she can handle what we do." The audience laughed with him, their confidence in his victory unwavering. Victor looked back at her, still grinning. "But you don't belong here," he continued, stepping closer, towering over her. "This ain't some movie. You're not some warrior princess. This is real. And in the real world," he cracked his knuckles again, smirking, "people like me crush people like you." Still, Eva said nothing. Victor sighed dramatically, shaking his head as if he truly felt bad for her. "Tell you what," he offered. "I'll make this quick. One hit, I promise. You won't even feel it until you wake up." The crowd roared with laughter again. They loved the show he was putting on. To them, this wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Victor leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough for her to hear. "Just stay down when it happens," he murmured, his tone dripping with confidence. "No one will blame you." But Eva? She just lifted her gaze to meet his, her expression calm, steady, unshaken. And for the first time, something flickered in Victor's eyes. Something small, something brief. Doubt. The bell rang. Victor charged. A freight train of muscle and fury, coming straight at her. His fist flew forward, a wrecking ball of force meant to end this fight in a single blow. A hit that had shattered bones, knocked out the toughest men in seconds. But his fist meant nothing. Eva wasn't there. She was already gone. She sidestepped effortlessly, moving like water slipping through cracks. The crowd barely had time to register what happened before Victor swung again, faster, angrier. Eva's eyes gleamed as she ducked, her movements smooth, effortless. She didn't just dodge, she danced around him. Victor growled in frustration, throwing another punch, this time with more force. But once again, he hit nothing. Eva let out a soft hum. "One hit, wasn't it?" she murmured, her voice light, almost teasing. "You promised it'd be over in seconds." Victor snarled and lunged at her again. Eva leaned just out of reach, the ghost of a smirk on her lips. "Maybe you meant minutes?" she offered. Laughter rippled through the crowd, not mocking her, but him. Victor's face darkened. His movements became wilder, less controlled. He threw another punch, but she was already behind him. "No, wait," Ava said, tilting her head as if she were truly thinking about it. "Wasn't it just one hit? I think we passed that a while ago." The crowd erupted. Victor wasn't laughing anymore. With a furious roar, he swung again, a punch like a wrecking ball. And again, he hit nothing. Another miss. Eva glided past him, light on her feet, her eyes steady, calculating. She could see it already, the gaps, the openings, the weaknesses. Victor growled, his frustration mounting. No one had ever made him look like this. No one had ever dared. The crowd had been roaring just moments ago, laughing, jeering, waiting to see her crumble. Now, they weren't laughing anymore. The energy in the warehouse had shifted. Not to excitement, not yet. Just confusion. This wasn't how the fight was supposed to go. Victor was supposed to crush her. One punch, 1 second, and it would all be over. That was what they had expected. But now, he was swinging at air, again and again, missing. And she was untouched. Men who had placed heavy bets on Victor leaned forward, their eyes narrowing, whispering among themselves. She's fast. No, she's playing with him. Victor's just getting warmed up, he'll end it soon. But there was hesitation now, a flicker of doubt that hadn't been there before. Victor was missing too much. Even the women fighters, who had scoffed at Eva, who had seen her as nothing more than a foolish, pretty girl, were watching with new interest. No one had ever done this to Victor Rourke, and that was when unease set in. Because if Victor wasn't winning, what did that mean? He charged again, this time with everything he had. Big mistake. Eva moved. Not back, not away, but forward. A sharp elbow to the ribs. Victor gasped. He staggered, his body jerking from the unexpected pain. The moment Eva struck, the impact was sharp and precise. A solid elbow to the ribs. Victor gasped. His body jerked from the sudden pain, his footing faltering for the first time. And the entire warehouse froze. The first real hit, and it wasn't Victor who delivered it. The crowd erupted, but not in cheers, in disbelief. That she just... no way she got him first. She got lucky, that's all. But luck had nothing to do with it. Victor straightened, rolling his shoulders, his face twisting into something uglier. The cocky grin was gone. Now there was only fury. This wasn't funny anymore. This wasn't just some joke fight where he humiliated some foolish girl. She had touched him. She had hurt him. And in front of everyone. Victor's jaw clenched. That couldn't stand. His pride, his reputation, they were on the line now. He had been in this club for years, knocking out the toughest men like they were nothing. And he would not let that change because of some woman. Not in front of the people who feared him. Not in front of the people who bet on him. The fight wasn't about entertainment anymore. Now, it was personal. Victor wiped his mouth, even though there was no blood, and straightened. He was going to crush her. Not just to win, to prove a point. And when he won, he would make sure everyone remembered what happened to people who dared to embarrass him. But before anything could happen, she was already behind him. A precise kick to the knee. His leg buckled. He stumbled, for the first time in his career struggling to stay upright. The crowd's excitement twisted into confusion. This wasn't supposed to happen. Victor spun, rage flashing in his eyes. He wasn't playing anymore. He was going to kill her. But she was already moving. Eva's palm shot forward, not just a hit, but a final strike. It connected. A devastating blow to the side of his head. Victor's entire body locked for a split second. His eyes glazed over. And then, he fell. The warehouse went silent. Victor Rourke, the undefeated, the unstoppable, lay motionless on the floor. Out cold. The announcer stood frozen, staring at the ring, as if he couldn't believe what he had just seen. No one could. And then, in a voice barely more than a stammer, winner, Eva Laurent. Eva stepped back, her breathing steady, unshaken, untouched. Victor Rourke lay motionless on the ground. And for the first time that night, no one said a word. The same people who had laughed at her, who had mocked her for even stepping into the ring, were now speechless. They had expected her to be crushed in seconds. Instead, she had crushed their champion. Victor, the undefeated, the strongest, the hammer. And she hadn't even broken a sweat. The announcer hesitated, his voice cracking as he finally declared, "Winner, Eva Laurent." The moment the words left his mouth, the tension in the warehouse shifted. No cheers, no chance of victory, just a cold, uneasy silence. Then, whispers. She beat Victor. She knocked him out. Just like that. I didn't even see what happened. 1 second he was standing, and then people who had placed everything on Victor sat frozen. Their money lost, their certainty shattered. Everything they thought they knew about fighting, about strength, had just been flipped upside down. And then, all eyes turned back to Victor. The great Victor Rourke, who had sent countless fighters to the floor, was now on the floor himself, unmoving, defeated. A few of his supporters rushed toward the ring, shaking the ropes, trying to get his attention. "Victor, get up, man. Ma'am, or say something." But he didn't move. The man who had entered the fight with his usual smug arrogance, thinking it would be just another easy victory, wasn't even conscious to see how it had ended. The ones who had been cheering for Victor moments ago now took a step back. Because if Eva could do that to him, what else was she capable of? Eva didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She only stood there, watching as the reality of what had just happened sank into every single person in that warehouse. The laughter had stopped. Now they feared her. The same people who had laughed, mocked, and dismissed her as weak were now silent. They had underestimated her. They had sent their best against her. And in seconds, she had taken him down. But this moment, this victory, did not begin here. Days ago, Eva had stood outside a quiet hospital room, gripping an old photograph. The edges were worn, the image slightly faded, but she didn't need to see it clearly. She knew it by heart. It was of her father, a man once known for his strength, a man who had built a name for himself not just as a fighter, but as a teacher. In his prime, he had trained warriors, not brawlers, not criminals, true martial artists who understood discipline, control, and honor. He had believed in fighting only for the right reasons, never for greed, never for power. But those values meant nothing to the Iron Fangs. They had come to him offering money, promising influence. They wanted his best students, not to protect, not to teach, but to turn into weapons for their underground fights. He refused, and for that, they took everything from him. At first, it was whispers. His gym lost business. Fighters were lured away with better deals, bigger pay. Then it became threats. Broken windows, vandalized walls, stolen equipment. And finally, when none of that worked, they took him. A so-called accident. A brutal beating left him barely breathing. His body shattered beyond repair. His career was gone. His dignity stripped away. His future was stolen. Eva had walked away from fighting after that. She had sworn she would never step back into that world, never use the strength he had given her for anything other than survival. But standing in that hospital, watching her father struggle to even lift his hands, to even hold a spoon, she knew she couldn't stay away anymore. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice. She had one purpose now. Step into the Iron Fangs, beat them at their own game, expose their corruption, and bring them down piece by piece. They had thought they destroyed the Laurent legacy. They didn't realize they had only created its reckoning. From the shadows, Dante Valero, the man behind the Iron Fangs, studied her. Victor Rourke was still unconscious when Eva finally turned away. The fight was over. She had won. But this wasn't just about victory. It was about what came next. The Iron Fangs had seen countless fighters step into this ring. Men twice her size. Men trained to destroy. Men who had fought and bled for the entertainment of the crowd. But this woman, she was different. And different was dangerous. She didn't fight with brute force. She didn't fight for money. She fought with precision, with purpose. That terrified them more than anything. Because power could be controlled, strength could be overpowered. But someone like her, someone with skill, with intent, she was a threat. Eva met their gazes as she stepped down from the ring. Unflinching, unshaken, their expressions had changed. Gone were the smirks, the looks of amusement. Now it was fear, uncertainty. They didn't know who she was. They didn't know where she came from. But now they knew one thing for certain. They would never underestimate her again. And this was only the beginning. Change doesn't happen overnight. Taking down Victor Rourke had proven that Eva wasn't weak, but it hadn't won the fighters over. Not yet. The Iron Fangs Fight Club had been built on power, on hierarchy, on the belief that the strongest ruled. And for years, strength had only meant brute force. It had meant knocking someone down, making them stay down, and climbing over them to the top. So when Eva took Victor's place, the fighters didn't know what to make of her. She had beaten their best, but what did that mean? Would she rule the same way as those before her? Would she be just another leader who demanded obedience through fear? Or would she be something else entirely? There were those who opposed her, men who had profited from the old ways, who had grown rich off the rigged fights, the dirty deals, the forced bets. They didn't want change, and for the first few weeks they challenged her. But Eva had come prepared. One night, after a match had ended, she stepped into the center of the ring, not to fight, but to speak. The Iron Fangs is no longer a pit for criminals to run their business, she declared, her voice strong, unwavering. The fighters stood still, listening, their expressions unreadable. But in the crowd, behind them, there were men who shifted uncomfortably. The ones who had thrived under the old system. The ones who had grown fat off the suffering of others. Eva turned her gaze directly to them. If you're here for a real fight, for a chance to prove your strength, to test your limits, stay. But if you're here to control, to cheat, to use this place to fuel your greed, get out. A low murmur ran through the crowd. Some of the criminals laughed, shaking their heads. You think you can just throw us out? One of them sneered, stepping forward. A man named Greaves, a bookmaker who had fixed matches for years, ensuring the outcomes always benefited him. This club has always been ours. You're just another fighter who thinks she can change things. The Eva didn't flinch. No, she said simply, I'm not just a fighter. I'm the one who's taking back what this club was supposed to be. And if you don't walk out of here now, I'll make sure you're dragged out in handcuffs. Greaves' smirk faltered. The room tensed. Then, from the shadows, another man stepped forward. Vincent Hale, the one who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes. The real power behind the corruption in Iron Fangs. He regarded Eva with cold amusement. You think the law scares me? He mused. You think some threats will make us back down? Eva took a step forward, her eyes unyielding. No, she said, but evidence will. She reached into her pocket and tossed a bundle of papers onto the ground. Betting slips, financial records, proof of every rigged fight, every illegal transaction. The fighters in the room stared. Some of them had never known just how deep the corruption ran. Others had simply accepted it as the way things were. Now they saw the truth. Hale's face darkened. You little... The doors slammed open. Authorities flooded the room. Eva had already tipped them off. There was no escape. Greaves, Hale, and the others who had kept the Iron Fangs under their thumb were taken away, shouting, cursing, fighting against the inevitable. But the moment the doors closed behind them, the tension in the room shifted. The fighters looked at each other, uncertain. Iron Fangs had always been controlled by men like Hale. But now they were free. And they turned to Eva, the woman who had made it happen. For the longest time, there had been fighters who despised the corruption that rotted the Iron Fangs from the inside. Fighters who had wanted change, but had been powerless to bring it. They had seen how the system worked, how matches were fixed, how money ruled over skill, how those who refused to play along were crushed beneath the weight of the club's corruption. But they had been afraid of what would happen if they spoke out, afraid of being cast out, blacklisted, or worse. Yet now, standing in this very place where they had once fought under unfair rules, they saw something different. A club that no longer forced fighters into matches they couldn't win. A ring that no longer decided victors before the fight even began. A space where true warriors, those with real skill, real passion, real discipline, could rise based on their strength, not the weight of the money behind them. And it was because of her, Eva. She had stood alone when no one else dared. She had taken the punishment meant for those who resisted, and she had won, not just for herself, but for them. And as they looked at her now, the murmurs in the room changed. Not whispers of doubt, not sneers of mockery, but words of gratitude. She did it. She freed us. The club is ours again. For the first time in years, the Iron Fangs Fight Club was no longer a place of shadows and deception. It was a place of honor, and they had Eva Laurent to thank for it. She met their gazes, steady and sure. "This place is yours now," she said, "and it's time to rebuild it the right way." And for the first time, the men who had once doubted her, the men who had once cheered against her, nodded. Eva Laurent had not only taken the Fight Club, she had saved it. She never struck more than she had to. She never humiliated them. She never fought to destroy. She fought to teach. Because Eva had never been just a fighter. She had been raised to be a leader. The turning point came not in a fight, but in what came after. One night, after another challenger had fallen at her feet, Eva didn't just walk away. She extended her hand. The man hesitated, staring at her, confused. He had expected to be left there, to be laughed at, to be told, like so many before him, that he wasn't strong enough. But that wasn't who Eva was. "Get up," she said simply, and slowly he did. She didn't rule through intimidation. She didn't keep them in line through threats. She led by example. She showed them that strength wasn't about tearing people down, it was about lifting them up. And the fighters noticed. The ones who had been discarded after losing a match, she gave them another chance. The ones who had been forced to fight against their will, she freed them. The ones who had been trained only to destroy, she taught them how to build. The Iron Fangs Fight Club was no longer a pit where men fought like wild animals for the amusement of gamblers. It became a place of discipline, of training, of purpose. Fighters still clashed, but now they left the ring with their heads held high, not broken. They fought for themselves, not for corrupt men in suits, not for money they would never see, not for survival, for the love of the fight, for respect, for each other. And slowly the whispers changed. They stopped calling Eva a mistake. They stopped underestimating her. They started calling her their leader. Eva stood in the center of the ring, watching as the fighters trained. Not as enemies, not as pawns, but as warriors. The Iron Fangs had once been a name tied to corruption. Now it stood for something greater. It was a place where the weak became strong, where the lost found purpose, where fighters learned that strength wasn't about who could throw the hardest punch, but about who could stand up the longest. Her father had once trained warriors, and now, so did she. Eva Laurent had walked into the Iron Fangs Fight Club as the underdog. Now, she was its leader. And for the first time in its history, the club had finally found a leader worthy of its name. Because true strength isn't just about winning, it's about rising and bringing others up with you. There was a time when the world believed strength only belonged to the biggest, the loudest, the most brutal. But strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it's in the quiet ones, the ones who don't boast, who don't seek attention, but who stand firm when the world doubts them. Eva was everything they thought she couldn't be. She was small, but she was mighty. She was beautiful, but she was fierce. They judged her by what they saw, and they were wrong. How many times has the world underestimated someone like her? How many times have people been dismissed, overlooked, or ridiculed simply because they didn't look the part? How many times have women been told they're too weak, too fragile, too incapable, only to rise and prove everyone wrong. But this isn't just about women. This is about the underdogs. The ones who are mocked before they even have a chance to prove themselves. The ones who are told you can't before they even begin. The ones who are pushed down only to rise stronger than before. The world will always try to define you, to put limits on what you can do, to decide your worth before you even have the chance to show it. But you, only you, get to decide what you're capable of. Eva stepped into that ring as the underdog. She walked out as something far greater. And so can you. So, to everyone who has ever been doubted, to everyone who has ever been told they weren't good enough, remember this moment. Because the ones they laugh at today are the ones they will fear tomorrow. And this was only the beginning. Subscribe for more stories of strength and victory. If you love this story and want to see more thrilling tales of determination, justice, and the triumph of the underdog, make sure to subscribe to our channel. There's always another story waiting to be told, and you won't want to miss it.